Welcome back to the Dad Task Force, where we try to find equipped men to equip men to be better fathers. Now, we'll get into family stuff and we'll talk about how to be a good partner from time to time because there is this partnership, whether you're in a two-parent household or a single-parent household, there's still a partnership that has to exist for the betterment of the kids, right?
Yep.
And I realize that that's not always the case.
Correct.
So, with that in mind, um, the subject I want to talk about today is specific to, I think, dads because we deal with it, I think, more than moms. And I could be wrong. I didn't look that up before we started. But have you ever been in a fight?
I have.
How long ago was that?
Give or take a few months. It was like 10 years ago.
And you are how old?
34.
So early 20s. What caused you to get into a fight at that age?
Um, so background, I played some football north of the border up in Canada. Um,
Professionally?
professionally.
So we have a pro football player on this on the task force. Just if that does
if,
anything for you.
if we call it that. Oh, there was a guy on my team who we were we went to like rival schools in college. It seems really, really elementary, but like we just never really clicked. Played each other, never got along, and then all of a sudden we're on the same team. Season's going on. Season's not going the way we thought it was going to go, and so we've lost a lot more games than we thought. And tempers are starting to boil.
Yeah.
And one day at practice, it just kind of reaches its teetering point. Didn't help that I played defense and he played offense, and there might have been a hit a little harder than he would have appreciated.
Sure. Did it escalate beyond the field?
It did not.
Okay. So I think that that's a good reason, a thing to like look at. Why did it not? Because when men, especially in competitive situations in a um, combat adjacent sport like football, where you're literally just bumping into each other, you start to push egos back and forth, and you start to push feelings, for lack of a better term, back and forth. How do you keep that from leaking into the locker room and spilling out into the parking lot?
Yeah, I think a lot of that actually, as immature as the fight might have been in the moment, is it goes back to like being mature enough to know that it probably went a little bit further than it should have, and knowing like we were both in the wrong there. And then just it's gonna be cliche or maybe like a weird thing to say, but like being a man and like owning up to that also
Sure.
shortly after like the fists stopped flying. So
There was fists.
there was fists flying.
Helmets
So
come off.
helmets came off.
Like baseball dugout clearing, benches clearing, or they just circle up and let you guys have at it.
Yeah, those. Well, we can call it
Clearing the benches.
clearing the benches.
All right.
So
Is there video?
there's not video.
If you have a video of this, I would like to see it. You can email us at thedadtaskforce@gmail.com, and I would be happy to post that on our website when that populates. Because we had a call out one night. Mom had her son was losing his cool over something. They had a roommate that rented a room, and she calls the police. And when we get there, she's literally hiding in the bushes.
Wow.
And so I'm like, well, that's abnormal. So we're trying to set up a surround and call out so that way we don't have to deal with going into somebody's house and having some advantages and eliminating disadvantages. And one of the guys on my team who I did not get along with,
Hmm.
and I haven't got along with for a really long time. Same thing, like we just didn't really like each other, but we're on the same team.
Right.
He goes, I'm just gonna walk up there. Well, that's not how you do things. Like the way it works, the way it's supposed to work is the first officer on scene is in charge. This is my scene. This is my incident. I am the incident commander until properly relieved by somebody of greater authority.
Right.
And he says, make fun of him now. He's walking up there, and he's like, was like, "What are you doing?" And the kid's literally hurling like cans of like refried beans at us. So we're just beyond his arm.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, get back here.
Right.
You're going to get hit. And it's just going to be the luck of the draw. You're going to go down. And now we're going to have to do an officer rescue. And as silly as it sounds, doing the small things well allows the hard things to become easy.
Right.
So I'm in charge. I'm the incident commander. Go sit in the car, interview the mom. I was very angry. He was very angry. And then it exploded when we got back to the station. And it never went to fists. But it was one of those situations where we are grown men in a professional environment that just like you, and you see this in every industry. There are people in this world that we don't like.
Right.
So as dads, how do we pour into our kids that emotional and maturity to make the right decision and disengage? And then when do we tell them it's okay to engage?
Right. That's the key part of it, is like communicating that fighting's not okay, but there's also times when fighting may be, for lack of a better word, like necessary.
What is your threshold?
My threshold is this person a threat to me and or my family or loved ones? And then is there like another option? And like if you can just walk away and leave and that would totally de-escalate the situation, cool. But that might not be the case in all situations. People follow other people and all kinds of stuff. Or like if you just know that walking away isn't going to settle it,
Yeah.
then
So as a dad, how are you talking to your kids about that? Like, so you've got your oldest are daughters.
Yep.
And now girls fight. I've seen it, but they don't fight, I don't think, as much as boys do or sons do. So is your perspective different with your daughters versus when your boys are old enough to be in those situations?
I've never thought about it. It is, I guess I've thought about it more with my sons because it does seem like boys fight more often than girls do. But that doesn't mean girls don't get like upset and get
Yeah.
crazy with one another. I guess the threshold isn't any different.
Let's take a quick moment to thank our sponsors for sponsoring the show. That is streamkits.com. That's STREAMKITZ.com. And with StreamKits, you get professional streaming and content creation technology simplified. Task Force 35 gets you a 35% discount code at checkout, where you can get a solo, duo, trio, or quattro setup for your content creation dreams. So if you want to go out backpacking, they've got that. You want to set up a podcast studio, they've got that. If you want to film a how to cook this, that, or the other in your own kitchen, they have a setup just for you, and it's affordable. You get the entire kit from them at the cost of about what it would take to get one camera without all the extra stuff. That's streamkits.com. Promo code taskforce35 at checkout.
Analyzing the situation might be a little bit different for a boy who's all up in your face and ready to fight, and versus a girl who's in your face and upset. Interestingly enough, my daughter had a situation with a boy at school who was like ready to fight everybody, including girls. So we did have to have like that discussion where you've got to be able to defend yourself. You can't just be taken by surprise by it.
Now, when in a situation like that, how are you like, what is the priming for that? Like, all right, daughter, you're going to go to school today and the guy is going to be doing these things. Let's establish your line in the sand. How are you? What does that conversation look like?
Yeah, it looks like, well, usually in those situations, there's been at least an incident to warrant the conversation. So it's like, hey, if anything like that happens again, if he gets in your space or some kind of space that you're like not comfortable with, like draw your line in the sand with your words, like, hey, stop or don't come closer. Or if you keep doing this, like, it's not going to end well. So I guess that's how you start the conversation, and then there's a whole nother conversation after that on how to handle that.
Yeah.
But
Daddy, I kicked him right in the teeth. Now did she violate a family rule because she misread the situation? Do you discipline that? Or do you say, look, yes, but that's not exactly what I meant, and I might not have been clear.
that is, I think that's the key. Like, if you think back on the situation and how you explained it, and if there's any gray area, like, you can't fault the kid because the kid's going to be like, well, you said this, you didn't say this, or you
Yeah.
didn't not say this. And so depending on like the situation, yeah, if the kid was like just standing too close to your kid and your kid just kicked him in the teeth and then started to open up a can on him,
Yeah.
then you've got to own up and say like, hey, I wasn't clear if that it has to be like a clear threat or a clear violation of what you
Yeah.
established.
It's tough. So we tell ours, or I tell mine, look, everybody's got a breaking point. Your breaking point's different than your breaking point, and your breaking point's different than your breaking point. So I've got three. And whatever that breaking point is, when you feel that you're in danger or somebody else is in danger and there's no other action but to act, then in that moment, you don't have a requirement to retreat. You have, full blessing to do what you have to do to defend yourself, to protect yourself. Um, and I think that that's an important line in the sand because yours is different than mine,
Right.
and my son and my daughters are different than mine. So it's like your sons and daughters are different than yours. So I want to be clear when we say this. Fighting externally outside of the home with other kids, whether you're for it or against it, is a choice for your family, but you have to be able to articulate that line in the sand of when it's okay for your kids to engage in that kind of behavior. And then you have to support them if they find themselves in that situation and the school gets in trouble, excuse me, and the school gets upset with them. And now they're like, well, I did what my dad told me to do. Do you backslide? It's like, well, I mean, that's not what I said, to save your own like self from humiliation, or you're like, look, I did exactly what
Yeah,
I was expected to do.
I think you've got to just, you can't like throw your kid under the bus. You've got to say, hey, this is what I told my kid. This is why I told my kid this situation might occur. And then I think like the maybe spoken part of that is like you got to put some back on the school too. Like, why? Like, you can be as upset with my kid as you want, but this could have stopped a long time ago.
Yeah.
Because usually it's not the first time. Like,
No.
it's not like these kids
Well,
randomly just got into it.
sometimes it's the first time.
Sometimes, but rarely. So,
I as an SRO, there were two incidents that come to mind. The first was one handled really well by the parents. Some kids got another student all spun up and wrapped around the axle, and he saw somebody else that, to this day, I'm not really sure how they contributed to the overall interaction,
right.
but the result was he got punched in the face, which pushed his lips into his braces, which sent him to the ER to get that fixed. Now, mom was really upset, and dad came in. He's like, "What are we gonna do about this? Why did this kid act like that?" Not in a way like you're at fault, but like, how do we support you and build you up so that you don't do this again? How do we create maturity? And so what we did was, because both parents and both families were on board with this, we came together and I mediated. By mediation, I just sat there and made sure everybody was on the same page. And what happened was one kid became the buddy of the other kid, and like they helped each other out and supported each other through the rest of their high school career. They played sports together. They're on the same team. And what we saw was the aggressor in the first incident developed maturity so fast because now he had responsibility. He had things to think about, became like student athlete of the year a year or two later. And it didn't define that one incident, didn't define him. In the separate incident, something different school, one kid was being mouthy and he was just constant, just chips at everybody. And he got popped in the face by somebody that had enough. And he fought back, and it was a big fight, and he ends up losing the fight. So he instigates it and he loses it. And what do you expect happened? What do you think happened?
Oh, his parents were up in arms.
Up in arms, demanding suspensions and expulsions. And I'm gonna sue. And it's like, well, let's walk this back and look at this in a way that makes sense to everybody. Like, just because you feel a certain way, you feel like your safety was threatened, their safety was threatened. But that's not what happened.
Right. He threatened the safety of somebody else in that situation.
And I think that's why we want to have this conversation, is because of dads. A lot of us have been in that situation, maybe less. I don't know what the numbers are. Is fighting more prevalent in yesteryears than it is today? And has fighting changed? Like, we tried to eliminate fist fights, and now it seems like we have more violent fights.
Yeah, that is true. I think they're, at least now, to me, I hear about them less than when we were in school. And even going like to my high school coaching days, I don't think I heard of fights very often. But yeah, I think that the other side of that is because they are less often occurring now. When they do happen, it's like, it's crazy stuff.
Yeah. And to what, like, I guess, how do we solve that in the home so it's not an issue in the schoolyard or in the parking lot or at somebody's job site?
Yeah. I think you encourage your kid to talk to the other person, because most of the time there's no talking to the other person beforehand. Like, the kids aren't, it's expecting a lot of kids to like go and approach the other person, but teaching them how to like actually deal with conflict with your words, and then like letting them know like you're not always going to agree. But like in my younger years, I got in a lot of fights. There were a bunch of people that I ended up being friends with afterwards.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like, it's not like every single fight is somebody that you're not going to agree with. And that couldn't have been, I mean, most fights could have been handled way before fists started flying.
Way before. And not to, but, and a lot of times what you see generally, at least I feel like growing up, was that if we got into a fist fight or anybody got into a fist fight, give it a week and now the slate's clean.
Yep.
But now I feel like we have like this harboring of feelings, and now it just builds up to a point of like explosion, and there's no coming back from it because people have to be so extreme.
Yeah.
How do you deal with your kids dealing with when their friends get into fights? Like, that
it's interesting, right? Because you don't want your kid to like abandon their friends if they were wrong. But you also don't want your friend or your kid to come out and tell their friend like, hey dude, like, you suck, like, you should have done that.
Yeah.
It's about how they deliver that news, right? Actually identifying if their friend was in the wrong, like, and it's super hard for kids to see that for like without being biased to their friend. Like my oldest, if her friends are in a fight, like her friends could be saying 2 + 2 is 9, and she is going to be behind them the whole way.
That's right.
Yeah, like, yeah, right. It is 9.
Can't you do math, stupid?
It's so teaching them to like pull themselves back from the situation, right? obviously if their friend's in a fight currently and they're in danger, like you got to help your friend out
Yeah.
somehow. Um, but at the end of it, if their friend was wrong, they gotta tell them they were wrong. So
There's so many different dynamics to this I didn't expect. So now we have to talk about s- you know, managing your bias, managing your that aspect of it, self control in the sense of when is enough, and when is it cross the line into being too far.
yeah,
Um, and how do you facilitate that conversation in a way that their kid brain understands?
yeah, that's hard. Removing the bias might be, I guess, the impetus to the rest of it. And just giving them like a metaphorical situation.
Okay.
Um, and so telling them like, I don't know, I can't think of a metaphor right now off the top of my head, but some kind of situation where it's not them and their friends, right? It's like McDonald's and Wendy's,
Yeah.
and Ronald McDonald is telling Wendy this, and Wendy does
Oh,
this.
yeah. I
Um,
see what you're saying.
yeah,
So you eliminate the personal aspects of it.
yeah,
We've had that conversation with adults too. Like, just hey, what would you do in that situation if you didn't know who was involved and you just had this person and that guy, and they're like, how would you handle that? Well,
right,
I would do this. Okay, well then, if that's the case in that situation, why aren't we doing it in this situation? Is it
right,
because you know somebody?
right. Like, why does your vision on this situation change because you're on one side or the other? So,
Yeah, why does it make difference?
yeah.
What now I want to transfer from friends into actually into the household. So you coach your kids.
Yeah.
You've got, and by the way, your kids are like, they seem to be just super tight. They're always, I never see them going anywhere without the other one. But what happens when they fight? Like, does it escalate to fists or pushing or shoving or any kind of physical fighting, or are they still not quite there yet?
Um, it's
Yeah.
it's only escalated to pushing a couple times. It has never come to hands, like fists, thank
Mhm.
goodness. Um, I mean, in the house, I don't want to say it's an advantage, but it is preferable because like you most times can monitor the situation,
Sure.
and you don't want to like just nip it in the bud right away, in my opinion. Like the second they start disagreeing, you don't want to just be like, hey, cut it out. Like let them figure that out, because conversely, like it's going to help them figure out other situations outside the home. Like, okay, this is when like my breaking point is, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna figure out when it is. Um, and then if it comes to that, that's definitely the time to break it up. Don't ever just let them like get after it. But I think you have to address them separate. Like one can't hear you coach or discipline the other one, because the second that you take, I don't want to say take the side, but like take the side of one, the other one's gonna feel like they were justified, even if you like come to them
Mm.
afterwards and tell them something's different.
And here we
So,
have it. Unbeknownst to us and unintentional, we have our first disagreement.
oh, okay,
Sort of. Sort of. I wanted to just clarify that. Sort of. Um, we we have different ways of, my wife and I, but something that I've learned to implement based on what I've seen her do, because I was, working all the time and she's staying home mom, so she had a lot more firsthand dialing in with this. But she makes him stand there and say, "What was your part? What did you do? I don't want to hear what they did. What did you do?" And when
okay,
they're done, what did you do? And what that does is now they have to be accountable, because they know if they're full of it, the other one's gonna be like, "Well, sort of. You said this, but that's not what you did.
right,
Like that, I didn't like." So she'll pause. And, what did you do? And if they just keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, I'll stand on face to face and just make them stare at each other. And eventually they start laughing. because like this is the dumbest
Dumbest thing ever.
thing ever, and they laugh, and then it's that we go back to that thing we talked about in episode 1 or episode 2, where when emotions are high, the feelings brain, the strong feelings is up, and logic and reasoning is down here. So we're not processing information in a way that makes clarity or logical and objective sense. But as time passes, those two things cross, and we come into the front part of our brain where we can actually reason with somebody. And if they're heated, I didn't do anything. It's never their fault.
Yeah.
But you sit there
I-
long enough, and all of a sudden, it's like, this is what I did.
I might adopt that, honestly, because instead of like removing the like source of agitation from the situation, like you're making them just deal with it right then.
Yes.
And
Now,
so-
I will say I liked your method when I'm dealing with other people's kids.
right.
So I want independent stories. Like I'll go if child A is, well, he said this. I go, okay. And then I like, you go over there, child B, come over here. What happened when they did that? So now I'm trying to I'm having independent reports, and I
Right.
piece it together, and I'm like, well, I'm not involved. So I'm kind of seeing how this lands.
Right.
And then I put them now. I'm like, all right, tell me what you did. Then I adopt that aspect of it. So it's more of a hybrid of what I've seen and what you're doing. And I think that there's benefits to both. And then you also always run the risk of it escalating during that interaction.
Right.
Like
That's true.
I didn't say that, and then
Right.
it's over, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. Look, I think at the end of the day, we land on two or three things. One, you have to set the threshold. You have to draw your line in the sand. Two, you have to communicate expectations clearly and articulately in a this and that manner, and eliminating as much gray area as possible.
Right.
And then three, you've got to back up what you said. You
Yeah.
got to be accountable to your words when it comes to this kind of thing, because you can't even say the V word in public or in schools, because everybody automatically goes to the worst case, the shootings, the stabbings, the murder. But we can prevent a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot with the communication stuff. Because if my kid comes to me or your kid comes to you and they're like, Dad, this is what happened. It's happening at school. I'm watching XYZ happen every day, and this kid is doing it. It's the same kid all the time. And we've told the teachers, and they're like, there's nothing we can do. So now you've reported the problematic behavior up the chain of command into the teacher staff, and nothing's being done. And then we're surprised if something happens.
Right.
It seems reckless.
Yeah. Sadly happens more than we'd like it to.
Yeah.
But
any tips and tricks on how to treat war wounds?
war wounds?
Like when after post fight, when there's boo boos and
I thought we were
sores?
talking about real war wounds. It was like I
No,
got
no,
zero
no,
experience with that. I don't know. I'm maybe a not too valuable piece of or not too valuable resource here, because I am like, don't go to the hospital, don't go to the doctor.
Yeah.
We can fix this here.
So how you fixing that at home? What's your home remedy?
Um,
We'll say black eyes or fat lips.
black eyes and fat lips, cold metal pressure, like go as like UFC or boxing as you
Yeah.
can, because
Yep.
I mean there's a reason that they do it, because it gets rid of the swelling the fastest.
Sure, yeah,
So.
that makes sense. I will say that unless that there's a deep puncture or a thing falling out, you can probably just deal with it at home.
Most
We now, our attorneys have told us we can't give real medical advice. So these are more opinions than anything. We're not telling you this is the way of the world or how to do things. This is just how we manage and process information. Because at the end of the day, you're the adult. You're in charge. You're the one that has to make that decision. You can't call Dave on and say, hey, so my kid beat the brakes off the neighbor and there's a lot of blood. what should I do? Because he's been advised by our attorneys not to answer that question
Yeah.
because you have to make this. That's why you have the big adult brains. So you make the big money so that you can solve that.
Yeah. I am not any medical school or medical school resource. As much as I would like to be.
Yeah. Any what's the wildest thing you've seen on the field as far as fights go or in a locker room?
Oh, I've seen some crazy stuff happen in the locker room. Oddly, like similar topic. Craziest fight I've seen in the locker room was just a guy getting his head just bashed into a locker. By like one of the biggest guys on the team, and there's nobody stopping. Like, as much as we try and de-escalate the situation, like nobody one-on-one could stop this guy. But on the flip side of that, like this guy was talking crazy to this guy, and people were trying to like get him to stop before he got punched. But sometimes egos just start flying.
Egos fly and a lack of self-control gets you into these situations. And lead by example, right? So I can think of a couple incidents where somebody was running their mouth and the consequence was they got hit in the face and they got hit one time. They hit the ground so hard that they either went into a coma or in a couple of instances, you read about it from time to time, they die.
Right.
So when we teach de-escalation, we talk to, hey, have you ever been punched in the mouth? And most cops or security guards, they're like, yeah, great. So now you understand the value of de-escalation.
Right.
Nobody likes getting hit in the face.
No.
That's why professional fighters, they train for it, but they also train to dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge.
Right.
Because nobody likes it.
Exactly.
Anything else?
No, I do want to put some clarification out there. There was like school comments we made. We're not bashing teachers. We know
No.
it's a hard job. We know there's sometimes there's times when like there is nothing you can do. Your hands are tied.
By admin and school boards.
Yep, exactly. So big thank you to the teachers. I'm a big fan of teachers, but
Amen.
yeah, I just wanted to put that clarification out there.
Yeah, no, this is, and honestly, we talk about these things in an exemplar, I'm gonna back that up. We talk about these things hypothetically in a way that makes sense to other guys that have kids in similar situations. Not every dad has a kid that plays sports.
Right.
Not every dad has a kid that's an academic outside of school or does extracurricular, but most states, if not all states, require that your kids go to school. So every dad has a kid that goes to school. So it's a relatable concept. What we're encouraging you to do is communicate with your kids, have a conversation with your kids, set boundaries with your kids, and then back your words up and stay true to what you said. Yes, teachers are great. Without them, we would all be a bunch of dummies. We've got some exciting news coming out. It looks like we have our first sponsor, and we'll divulge that as soon as the ink is on the paper. But great things are happening. We are excited. I still haven't got that Google Doc out. It will come out sooner than later. And that's all I got for this week. We look forward to the conversation next week. Anything?
No.
All right. Take care. We'll see you next time.
See y'all.